Welcome to the Pact Podcast, where we discuss matters of Christian living and Christian discipleship for Christian community. PACT stands for Prayer, Accountability, Confidentiality, and Truth, essentials for doing life together in the local church. I'm your co-host, Tim Harvey, alongside co-host Ian Carrico and Adam Rogers. Now, on to the Pact. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about education. We've had, probably all of us in here have had people ask us from time to time about making decisions about education, particularly regarding our children. And we all know that the climate, context that we're in now with our culture, that there's some concerns about things that are being taught and what could be taught in the future and those sorts of things. Lots of questions about morality and things like that with school choice, but then education as well. So I'm just going to tackle this as a kind of a big issue for parents to deal with, and how to think about how their children are being cared for and taught. And so Adam and I don't yet have children old enough to go to school. They're in preschool age, I guess.
We're working on it. Yeah.
That's coming up real quick. Yeah. But Ian has been here before and dealt with kids going to school. So what are your thoughts on this? And I mean, is this a question I know it's a question I've gotten, but is this a question that you have dealt with before?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think it's a question, and there's no question to the fact that as you eavesdrop on conversations, whether it be in the church or even outside of the church, this is obviously a topic that many parents or guardians, wrestle with, might be a good way to put it, or if that's too strong of language, they discuss, and so absolutely, I think so, and there's a reason for that, because as a parent or guardian, your world and the way you think totally shifts. It's not about just you and your spouse anymore. This involves other human beings that you are responsible for. Yeah. And we understand the sensitivity of a child and really just the context that they learn from. We understand that there's a worldview that is built within them over a period of time. Mm-hmm. I have that worldview, and it was greatly influenced from my upbringing. Mm-hmm. And every one of us has a worldview that is shaped in that regard. So all of that together, when you think in the realm of being a Christian, being a believer, it matters where you put your children and how your children are able to learn, and all those things come into play when you're dealing with this idea of education. I have 4 sons, and 3 of my boys now are in the system. Or in the system, in school.
In the system.
Yeah, in the
criminal justice system.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely hope not that, right? Yeah.
Carrico boys are considered especially heinous.
Right, yeah, they're in the schoolhouse.
These are their stories.
But of course, my youngest in school is in preschool, so he'll be in kindergarten next year. But I use them as an example to say every one of them are different in the way, just their personality, in the way they learn. And so Joni and I are always thinking through that, because what my oldest experiences is going to be different from my second born and so on and so forth. And I say all that ultimately to say, we live in a blessed area, Carlisle County. I'm just speaking, it's just me speaking. So, right, nobody, it's just us. We have probably many educators, maybe even listen to this podcast, have some great teachers, great educators, and you just absolutely cannot find any better. And so we're blessed in that regards to think about, where our kids are attending. But even still, when you think about not only Carlisle and beyond, as a parent, as a Christian, you have responsibility. Mm-hmm. And that is to make sure that you understand what your child is learning. And I think every teacher, I hope, would want that out of a parent, sort of this idea of like, what are you teaching my children? And how can I be responsible for that, And so that's a part of the equation. But even still, then as a parent, we have these conversations, right? So you got public school, you got private school, you got homeschool, and in the conversation of life, Joni and I have had these conversations before, and sometimes they involve a little bit more emphasis than others. But you ask those, I think, questions that are worthy to be asked. What's best for my children? Mm-hmm. And it's not that one way of education, if I could say that, it's probably a better way to say it, but it's not that one route is better than the other. It really is, where's my child going to thrive the most? And I think as a parent, as a Christian parent, in a world that is broken and confused, I think those are worthy questions to ask. And so every parent has to land somewhere. And I hope that every parent would land through prayer, through study, through wisdom and discernment, and really thinking out loud, if you will, what's best, for my child. And if one can have peace in their heart, and if one can make a very informed decision about that and feel good about it, then praise the Lord. So that's a general, I think, point of view from my seat with children, and just thinking about their learning styles and where they're at. Let me just throw this example, and I don't want to take all the time, that's for sure. If I were to be somewhere else in the world or somewhere else in the United States, would I think differently about education? Yeah, probably, perhaps. Because again, what school system are they going into, and what are they teaching in that school system? And so, I want to make sure that those are questions that I, as a parent responsible for my child, I want to make sure that I'm answering those and have a good grasp before my child enters into it.
Right.
And that's me. Now, somebody else may have a different perspective on it, and that's perfectly fine. I would respect that wholeheartedly. But I think as a parent, I need to understand what my children are learning, and where they're at. And again, just some of it gets down to preference. It just gets down to just preference. So that's a general way to put it.
When I was, when I was in school, elementary school, the idea of homeschool and things like that, at least in our area, I grew up in Webster County, there wasn't a lot of people who were involved in that at the time.
Right.
There were some Christian families who would homeschool. It's very rare, though. And most of the time when we've heard of somebody who had been homeschooled, it was because they were troubled at school, usually disciplinary issues or something like that. And so the answer to that was to homeschool. But I feel like things have changed really significantly over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And it seems like that homeschooling is just more of a preference issue. There's a lot more of that happening, and probably a lot more private school choice, I would think, now.
I would think.
And I'm thinking it's probably because of, you mentioned, obviously it's a good point that you made, that in our area we're blessed and we've got great teachers and great leadership, and there's probably a lot more peace of mind thinking about some of these moral issues that Christian parents are having to deal with. But Adam, you're teaching at a private school right now at Northside Christian School. Help us think through like our context as far as, we live in such a time where everything that's happening on a national level, we know about it a lot more now because of media and things, and it feels like it's happening to us, even though it might not actually be happening to us in the moment, but there's still fear that it's coming at some point, even if it's not now. So, how do we think through that in our area specifically, and some of the things that Christians are going to have to think about sending their kids to school?
Sure. So, well, I'll try to be objective. Everybody is super opinionated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm pretty passionate about education. Not just because I do teach, but I'm currently teaching in a private school, not because I thought I was going to be a school teacher, but because I love to teach. So I'm very passionate about education. And it makes you even more passionate as you think about your own child. And I could I could definitely see somebody taking what I say at any point in this and being on the defensive because you're just
Yeah.
as passionate about raising your child. And I'm not
Right.
trying to like down nobody. So take what I have to say for
Absolutely.
whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I will say this. Let me start here. There's not a school choice, public school, private school, homeschooling that removes your child from the effects of the fall.
Yeah, that's true.
Everybody assumes that one of these options can do that, or you go the opposite. And what I mean is, I've heard Christians argue that they will send their child to public school because the public school needs missionaries. Hence, my child is in this Christian family. I'm equipping them at home, and I don't think your line of reasoning is wrong necessarily. But you also have to understand you're sending a 13-year-old into the world.
Yeah.
You know, and they are going into the world, regardless of your a local private school or a public school here in our area that's going to be relatively smaller in number. That the influence of the world's still there, but also you can't operate from the other side and say if I would just send them to a private Christian school. Listen, I teach at a private Christian school, and I can tell you there's as much worldliness. I mean, maybe it's curtailed a little bit, but not to the degree of like it's gone. And then that leaves some people to mentally say, well, then homeschooling, I can control the morality in my home. Sure, okay. Lose your temper, show
Yeah.
your tail occasionally, and there's this sinfulness of your own self that will come out in your teaching, whether it's you, a father, or you, a mother, teaching, or the siblings are going to school together. You understand that sin will run rampant even in your home. It does at the dinner table. It's going to if you have a schoolroom in the house. So
Yeah.
there's not a way for us to remove our children from the effects of the fall, but there are certainly parameters that we can observe in some of these options that do help us and aid us as parents, because first and foremost, what I'm looking for as a parent sending my son in the fall to school is an institution that will partner with my parenting philosophy from a Christian worldview to help me educate my child when I can't be in the room. So I personally, this is me speaking now, I can't see the public school system fulfilling that for me. And my main objective is that my children be education. You know, it's an educational thing. So for me, I'm not worried about the amenities or the extracurricular sport activities. Those are important, but they're not ultimately for me foundational, non-negotiable points. I want my children to learn and be prepared to move on for life. And if that private Christian school, which I teach at, has a basketball program and they want to play, sure, but that's not my primary objective. Some people, that is their primary objective. It just depends on where you're at there. But I'm looking for somewhere to partner with me and me with them that I can trust to teach my children truth and to do it with excellence. I don't want to send them somewhere where I know that the institution is about truth, but there's no quality, of teaching, or there's poor test results or something like that. That's counterintuitive. So for me, the public school system doesn't aid me in my thinking of raising my children in a Christian worldview. Again, I get the argument that you want your children to be on the mission field, but they've got to mature to a point where you can then send them out. And I can't say that mine will be ready as young children. I hope that they will be. So, and then for us, so that leaves me and Kara, my wife, the options of private school or homeschooling, which for a long time I kind of counter-reacted. I went to public school growing up. I know exactly what happens at public school. So like I kind of counter-reacted and said, well, we're only going to do homeschooling, and kind of like ignored all the other options. But then getting to learn more about the private school system, private Christian schools in particular, you do have that freedom to choose at that point, like which school you want to send them to. And you can certainly quiz them and learn about their philosophy. And the school that I teach at currently, I'm very much on board with. Otherwise, I wouldn't be there. The educational philosophy is there. Our slogan is academic excellence from a Christian worldview, and so it's explicit in what the school wants to do. It wants academic excellence, which is the goal of education in a secondary school or a primary school, secondary school, and then from a Christian worldview. So for us, that's what we're looking for. I'm not looking to remove my child from the world. It's not possible. If we were to homeschool my son or daughter, they would, and they already see plenty of sin in us anyway. So they would just be more opportunity. So I'm not looking to remove them from the world. What I'm looking for in Karen and I's looking for a school for our children is who can we partner with that does have academic excellence, is operating from a biblical Christian worldview, that we feel comfortable partnering with so that we can send our children there and to receive great education, both, theologically, mathematically, scientifically, literature, every avenue. That's what we're personally looking for.
So what about, there might be there's probably parents who listen and say, yeah, I've struggled with this. Even as we've talked about our area being blessed, but, we've talked, I don't know if we've talked on this podcast or not, we've talked together about the Equality Act that's being brought up in Congress and some different things. Even as great as our area is, there may come a day where some of the things that we don't agree with from a Christian worldview, that our folks don't even have a choice, in order to keep their job. They may have to go along with some of the things. But somebody's listening, they say, I have these concerns, but those other options just aren't realistic. I don't have the time to homeschool my kids, and I don't have the money to send them to a private school either.
Yeah.
And I like our public school system. I like the teachers, and I want it to do well. So Ian, what kind of advice could you give to somebody in that situation who they know their kid's going to the public school system, but they still have some concerns about what could be taught or have to be taught at some point?
Yeah.
How would you counsel them?
Yeah. So here's the thing. If we have any school board members listening, they're not going to like this statement, but I mean, this would not be an indictment against anybody on the school board, and this would not be passing it off on somebody else. But the first step, logical step in that concern, would be to discuss that with your local school board member. I mean, the process is in place for them to be elected and to some degree to represent you, right? To represent maybe a voice or whatever. I as far as I know, all meetings, I believe, are open to the public, so that people can go to express your concern. So my first step would be to lovingly and graciously, contact a representative, and just share your heart with them, right? And share your concerns with them. Here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to put it on social media, and you don't want to run the school in the ground. Sure. You want to make that contact. Again, there's no room for anybody being mean and ugly about it, but to share a concern, and then of course, I think, use the forums that are available to you to share your concern. And as a Christian, you need to act Christianly, right? Mm-hmm. You need to walk and act in a passionate way, because you're our parent. You would be concerned, but you got to make that step, and it doesn't need to be aired out on social media or to everybody else. Mm-hmm. Go to those that represent you. Go to those who have a voice for you, and express that concern. Mm-hmm. That would be a starting point. Now, there does become that hard conversation, or a hard point, a threshold. Let me just use that word, a threshold that you reach. Okay, what if none of that changes? What if none of that works? Well, then as a people, as a Christian, you will be faced. I think I say you, and I say we. I got to put myself in that. We will be faced with a hard, decision, because inevitably, if public school would be the only option you have, and at some point there becomes so many restrictions put in place that X, Y, and Z, is happening, and there's nothing you can do about it outside. Again, I think you got to express those concerns. That becomes that's a whole other conversation. Maybe we're not there quite yet, but at some point, your options are, you're out, because, if you can't homeschool, and obviously a vast majority can't, they work jobs. It's just not logical. Private school is the money, finances, an issue. I just, can't. I understand that. But Joni and I, we've had those conversations. It is a thing. It is a thing. You have to consider that. Financially, can we afford it? Is this something, that we could do? I believe God can make a way for that. If God's leading you to it, don't let money, stop you. But you got to think through that, use wisdom and exercise, because that is a real decision. So there are avenues, I think, for money to be taken care of, and things that you could do to help. But if those options are off the table and public school is it, you get this dilemma.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to remember in that circumstance, because there will be a lot of people in that category that just can't afford private school and can't do homeschool. And in fact, they want to support the public school system. This is these are people that we know and we want it to thrive. But I think a good thing to remember is that that the parents are the primary educators still. I think about people in other places in the world where their education system, as far as what's being taught about humanity, the nature of humanity, and things like that, is far worse than what we would find anywhere in the United States. But Christians in those countries or missionaries in those countries, they have to just realize, okay, these people are going to teach my children things that are contrary to the scriptures. And I'm going to have to invest and say, they told you this, but that's not actually true. And you need to, I want you to understand what's really true. And this is just the context we're in. There's going to be times that they're going to say, and you have to be invested to help your child know which things they can trust and which things they can't, if it comes to that.
And that brings up a good point, just to clarify, because here's the deal. At some degree, when these things are passed down, I say express your concerns to maybe a school board representative or superintendent, or voice your opinion in a forum, that would be open to the public, maybe a school board meeting. Some degree, they still can't control it. I mean, they're
that's what I mean. I mean, there's some things that are going to
they're handing it down. But the reason I say that is not to put them in a point of pressure, because I hope I would be at a place to say, I know you can't change this, but I want them to hear me. As a parent, I want them to hear me. And even more, I want my child to know that I'm addressing a situation. To the degree that when I set my child down and say, they're teaching something that's contrary to Scripture here, I need my child to understand, and I've talked to them about this. And we've expressed, we don't believe this. This is not the way. I need them to know that I've shared my heart with teachers. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if somebody comes to talk to me and is concerned, I want to have an open door policy. Let me hear from you. I may not be able to change anything about it, but I'll hear from you. And I hope that others would as well. And so I don't have any problem saying, I don't agree with this. What can we do? Is there something we can do? Maybe there's not, but I want to make this, I want to make my case. And I need to do it for integrity's sake and character's sake, so that when I go and talk to my child about what's being taught that I don't agree in, I can let them know that I've talked to you, that I've expressed my concerns, so that they'll understand. I'm just not throwing them out and trying to hide something from them, almost as if to say, well, we don't believe that way. And then they begin to develop, well, what do I believe? I need them to know I've made every step possible to express a desire. That's why, we contact senators and email our representatives. Now, will it change everything? It doesn't change everything all the time, but you can't complain about something if you're not going to stand up, for it. I mean, you can't, and that's my opinion. We need to stand up, to some degree, and express our convictions over things. And now, if it doesn't change anything, at least we've done our duty. to say this is where I'm at. So I don't know. That's for what it's worth. Sometimes people that we love, people that we trust wholeheartedly, they can't change things. I mean, I know a lot of our school board members. I know our superintendent, and I know more often than they want to be, they're put in very difficult situations to make choices, that the public may not agree with. I'm still called to respect them and help them, support them any way I can. But they can still hear my desire and they can still hear my heart, even if there's nothing that can be changed. And I just think that helps the integrity side of things and the character side of things when I set my child down. Because what my child says, well, what have you tried to do about it? And I say, well, nothing. I put it on social media. I blasted to school. They're the worst thing on the planet, and that doesn't help. And so
I think it goes back to what Tim said. Is like the parent is always the primary educator.
Right.
We can do that very poorly, or we can do it as well as we can. And whether you go private, public, whatever, you still need to be your parent's primary teacher and your student's primary advocate for that matter. Some people have academic trouble and they think, well, I'll send them to the private school. Well, you still have to advocate for your child. Like it doesn't matter which direction you go.
Yeah.
You still need to be an advocate. You still need to be someone who is invested in teaching them at home. And that's certainly, that can't be negated regardless of what schooling option you choose. You mentioned the money, and there's no easy way to figure that out. So, does it cost you more to go to public school or private school? Well, if you're talking about in the immediacy, private school is going to cost more money. And we should say, I guess, it is a sacrifice for every family.
Sure.
I mean, it's a commitment. I mean, whether they are doing well and above the median income, it's still a commitment that they have to commit to. And so, I think that it's hard to say what the payoff is monetarily. Now, I would say that in most cases the payoff can be very enriching as far as education is concerned. But as far as monetarily, do you come out ahead? Well, I don't know. I can't answer that. I do know that my first year teaching, I had 4 seniors in my class, 3 of which graduated with full rides to their university. I think, and it was in part due to the fact that they were intelligent human beings, but also due to the fact that they were in an environment that fostered that and gave them the opportunity to succeed. So I can't say that that's going to be every child. I'm not just saying our school is the one to go to, by the way. We have some fantastic private Christian schools in our area that I would recommend. I'm thinking of 2 in particular, CCA, and then, I just lost them. I wanted to plug them. Covenant at Hardin. Isn't it Covenant?
I believe so.
I believe it's coming out of Hardin.
Yeah. I think it is.
In Hardin, Kentucky. And so we have some fantastic private schools, private Christian schools in our area. And I think you'd hear similar testimonies to those folk. But also realize, too, and I can only speak to our area and the school that I'm in, oftentimes Christian private schools are willing to help you and work with you about how to do that. So I would just want to encourage you, don't so quickly dismiss private school or even homeschooling, which some people say can be an expensive option. Don't dismiss them purely because you hear dollar signs, being thrown around, but consider, having a conversation with families that are doing it. Here at Bethlehem, we have the full array of the spectrum. We've got homeschooling families.
Yeah.
We've got private school families. We've got public school families. We've got people who teach in the public school system. So we have some good, and they are solid Christians.
Sure.
So we have some good folks to talk to, and I know other churches like that exist around here like that too. So,
Yep,
Good deal.
Awesome.
Any other thoughts, guys? Or
No, it's good.
if you want to talk sometime in my office just for the fun of it about educational philosophies, I'm all game. But y'all don't want to talk about Rousseau right now, do you?
probably not.
Probably not. Yeah, no,
Out
not
of time.
many do.
Out
But
of time.
I will
Looky
extend
there.
the invitation to anybody who
looky
is
there.
bored
Yeah.
and wants to come talk about it with me sometime.
It's a good conversation. It's worthy. Every parent is
Yeah.
going to have it. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
you'll have it. And
Yeah.
so,
And we need to, in order
Yeah.
to be faithful parents. I think this is this is a necessary conversation to think through.
yep,
So.
for sure.
All right, good deal. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Pact Podcast. Weekly, we get together to think out loud discussing ethics, apologetics, theology, and how to apply God's Word to our everyday lives. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, or Spotify. For more information about our podcast, to connect with us or our church families, visit thepact.podbean.com. We pray you've been encouraged today and that you'll take the Pact with a group of close believers pursuing prayer, accountability, confidentiality, and truth.